Hello, and welcome to the winter webinar series for our listeners. Starting off the webinar, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Our guest at this time holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and has spent over 40 years working across multiple roles for NASA, including training shuttle astronauts and flight controllers. He was a branch chief of shuttle and space station flight software, a branch chief of mission systems operations, and NASA's chair of the Ground Segment Control Board, working with the international partners from countries such as Japan, Russia, France, and Germany. He was the chair of No Boundaries, an employee resource group for individuals with disabilities. In his spare time, he's a devoted husband, father, and grandfather, and an avid runner, completing more than 31 marathons. Joining us from Houston in the United States of America at 2 a.m. in the morning and awaiting a cyclone, a hurricane. So hopefully we don't lose power. Tracy Minish, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's an honor to get to speak to my mates over in Australia, someplace I want to come one day and visit.
I'm sure we'd be very happy to have you. So obviously you've had an extensive career with NASA. We've kind of gone through a little bit of that in the intro, and we're going to dive into that a little bit later as well. But you obviously seen so much. I wanted to start a little bit with your early life and study that found you at the largest space agency in the world. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I can tell you, I'm probably one of the most unlikely people to end up at NASA. I remember when I was in grade school, which is, the early grades, your first, second, third, I would have to go to special classes because I had a speech impediment and I had trouble dyslexia. So I remember holding up, having cue cards. I don't know if you see it, but it's called truck. And it's truck. And it would have the big letters for the TR and a big K. And then I had another one I remember my teacher holding up, and had to be pulled out of regular classes. And I had one called church. And it'd be a big CH, little UR, big CH. And I always thought my grandmother, put this church in there. So I was terrible at spelling. And also I was starting to lose my sight, but you really couldn't tell I have retinitis pigmentosa. And so if anybody's aware of it, if you were to take your hand and make a big O and then you slowly collapse that, your peripheral vision goes away first, which is your, and then you go actually to your central vision and you lose that. So I remember my mom, the teacher told her she thought I had a learning disability and that I was mentally challenged. So my mom took me and she took my older sister and younger brother, and we had our IQ tested, and I came out fine. But they wanted to make sure just because of my spelling and a little bit of my eyesight. So then I'm going along, and I graduate from high school, but I didn't make the greatest grades or the greatest on what we call the SAT, which is a standardized test to see if you're ready for college, because I did great on math, but I scored poorly on my English. And so I went that summer, and my dad had always said, tack your weaknesses first. So I took English and I made an F. So when I made that F, of course, they said, no more school for you. So I was actually not going to college then, and I had to wait about 2 years to save up money. So I'm paying for school myself. After about 2 years, I worked in a steel mill. I worked in a cotton mill, which is pretty hard labor if you've ever worked in a mill. I was doing physical labor, not using my brain much. But then I had to take remedial English and reading to be able to get back in school. So I was a little frustrated because I had to pay for 2 courses that didn't go towards my degree. So then I took those and I passed. They said, all right, you can come back to school. So when I get with my counselor, and I think this is a good lesson for us, my counselor confided that I was, I had retinitis pigmentosa, and I was losing my eyesight. And the counselor said, you know what? You don't need to go into math. Don't go into science. Don't go to that, because back then we didn't have assistive technologies. You know, you had a keyboard, punch cards. Can you imagine trying to do Braille on a punch card? Most of you may not know what a punch card is, but it was a card that they actually punched the holes in to actually be able to read what the computer should do, and you fed them in. So this counselor said, you need to go into counseling, or you need to go into something that you don't use your eyesight. And I knew that I was not very good in English, and that wasn't where my passion was. So I changed counselors. I got a counselor that would support me in what I thought I was capable of and what I wanted to do. So that's how I started going into computer science, I almost had a minor in math that they'd given it, took a lot of physics. So I had a computer science course, a degree rather, but that's kind of how I got into the science field. I knew that's what I was good at, and I was very fortunate. That's what I love to do.
And you weren't letting anyone else tell you otherwise, which is once again also another great lesson.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a little bit, because obviously you touched on the fact that you have retinitis pigmentosa, and that is hereditary. So you would have had other people in your direct family that would have had something similar. Did that give you a bit of an exposure to, what was that sort of news coming your way? What age were you when you got told that information?
So I have a grandmother. She had RP, and I remember we'd go to see him. She lived a good ways from us, probably about a 5-hour drive.
Yeah.
And she was my mom's mom and not my dad. So my dad, we probably went down there maybe 6 times in my lifetime,
Yeah.
from when I was little until we got a little bit older. So I didn't have a lot of exposure. And then I didn't know I really had it. You can have RP, and it's a protein that's missing. My mom had no symptoms, but she was the carrier. So
Right.
my grandmother had 7 kids, and out of those 7, my mom was the only person that carried it. She
Right.
gave it to me. And so I actually knew I was having trouble. I played on the football team, which is not soccer in America, but we do love soccer, by the way. But it was American football. When I would go out in the field, I would hold on to a towel with a teammate, because we had to go through the darkness, and it first impacts your eyesight in low lighting. So I would hold on to a towel, and my coach didn't even know I had it, because when I got out under the spotlights in a night game, when football is played at night, I could see.
Yeah.
But I actually, after I like to say, flunked out of college in my one course, I decided I'd join the Marines. And when I went, that's when I found out I really had it. My parents never spoke about it. I had a very dysfunctional parents. So my dad was unfortunately an alcoholic. He was also a very rough character. So on the weekends, he was usually gone. He would, not come home. And when he was home on the weekend, I was always hoping he was not. So so nobody spoke to me in my family. It's almost like it was something hidden, like a shame thing. But when I decided I'd join the Marines, and when I tried to join the Marines, they said, you can't pass the eye test, you're legally blind. So I found that out at 18, because when I wasn't going to college, I said, I'll join the military and serve my country. And they're like, darn, I can't even do that. So that's kind of how I found out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that would have been, was that something that you were anticipating, or was it something that completely hit you from out of nowhere and took some time to adjust to, I'd imagine?
Well, so when I started driving at 16, I was probably legally blind, but I knew I could not find our driveway. So I put a reflector up on the road so that I could see this reflector and say, because if you're making a right, I could see the driveway on my right, but I was coming from the other direction. You have to go across a lane. My eyesight was so poor, I wouldn't see the thing if I had to look to my left, because I was looking over a lane. I don't know if y'all drive the way we do, but in this way. And so I put a reflector, so I knew I was having problems with my eyesight. But it was like my parents gave me no support. They never discussed it. And I didn't feel that I wanted to tell them I was having this problem because they had enough problems of their own when I was growing up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I kind of found it out. I guess the one thing I'll say that you get different gifts. We all get different gifts. I think my gift is to have a positive, even in negatives. That with the childhood I had, I could have been upset, gone in different directions, and I didn't. So I think God gave me the gift of being happy in all situations. And my mom used to tell me there were 5 children. After she found out, it becomes obvious when you really can't see it all, and your parents have to accept that you have an eyesight problem. But she'd always say, Tracy, I'm so glad you got it. Your brothers and sisters couldn't have handled it. And I would always say, Mom, thank you. I'm so glad I got it too. but I was just kidding with her. But I think she was right. So
So you touched on that you'd sort of gone into a course in university and you'd flunked out of that. Then you tried the Marines. That obviously didn't sort of pander out either. Were these sort of things that you planned out in your own mind, or were you kind of more of a live in the moment sort of guy?
I think I was more live in the moment. I felt I was always smart enough to go to college, and I wanted to. Now, I have a brother who works for a grocery store chain called Kroger.
Yeah.
He's making as much money as me, never went a day to school. But I always had a drive, for some reason, to get more education, and I like math and science, and, algebra, calculus. I like those courses, and so I wanted to do that. And so I always knew I was going to do it. I just kept getting detoured. So it took me about 2 years to save enough money up. I went back. Then I met my wife, which is probably the greatest thing that ever happened. I tell people I'm married above my pay grade and I like winning. So I married a beautiful woman that is and supported me so much, and it really has helped me. But we've been married 46 years, and that really helped us. And so we went to school together. We at one point sold our car to go to school a semester to pay for both ours. Then we went 2.5 years without a car, and then we were finally able to buy another one again. And we just worked our way through. I at one time was changing tires at an automobile place for 5 days a week, and then I worked in a chicken plant, 2 12-hour shifts on the weekend. So because I thought, if I do this for 1 year, I said I'm going to do it for 1 year, put enough money in the bank, and maybe I can keep going to school and not have to stop. And we both graduated from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! Whoop whoop.
So yeah, you've obviously done a lot of different things to get to where you are. You obviously had the interest for science. You got told not to do science. You got told to work with your voice instead and do counseling or something with your hands or something like that. Were you finding opportunities in the scientific fields we have in Australia, like a work experience program where we can try different things out of school? Did you have those sort of opportunities, or was it something that you were finding really difficult to get in the door with science?
So I am a very unique one-off example. So I'm going and working all these things. I finally I've got the job where I was the resident manager, on-site manager for 310 apartments for married housing. So I went into married housing as a person renting, a room for my wife and I while we were going to school, and I got to know the staff, and they hired me to do that. And so I get ready to interview when you get where you're within a semester of graduating from college. They would let you go and sign up for interviews, and different companies would come to the University of Georgia.
Yeah.
So they had easels back in that time. And so I went in, they said, all right, today's the first day I could sign up for interviews. I go into this room and there's these easels, and they had a list of Singer Link, who made the simulators that they used to train astronauts and flight controllers, was coming to Georgia from Houston. And they had a list of names. They were coming the next day, and they had a waiting list. So I'm standing there and I'm thinking, oh, put my name on the waiting list. I'm not going to get in there. One day they're interviewing. Someone marched their name out because they just gotten a job. And instead of putting my name at the bottom, I wrote it there. I went down to a place that they do resale clothes. It's called Potter's House. You may have heard other names, but it's where people turn in their old clothes. And I bought a suit. So I bought me a suit, went to the interview the next day, and they gave me a plane trip. They were impressed enough with my grades and all my work experience, because I was managing, a large apartment complex. And they said, we're going to give you a plane trip out. So when I got to Houston, the first day of my interviews, I'd never been on a plane before. They said, we'd like to give you a job. And I said, yes. And I called my wife and said, we're moving to Houston. So that's what I was at the right, and I've made me 50 resumes. I was so tired of being poor, and Sherry and I were living on the fringe. If we would push our clothes in a grocery cart to the laundromat, push our groceries, we were, people probably today would think we were homeless. You just didn't see that back then, so nobody knew what we were doing, but we were so happy that I had a job.
Yeah.
And this is something I also did. My family was very dysfunctional. So I told my wife when I met her, I said, I want to move to New York City. I want to move to Texas, California, or Colorado. And there I went. I went to Texas.
So in your interview, this was your interview with NASA at the university, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you disclose your eye condition in the interview with them?
No, I did not.
No?
I did not do it at the time. And, I don't know how they would have reacted, because you're thinking this is like 1983. I know a lot of you may not have been born then, but I was going there, and I actually graduated from college. I tell people to persevere. I graduated from college when I was 28 years old in about 8 months. So I was almost 29 when I graduated from college, and I'd done a bunch of jobs. And I can't even tell you all the ones, but I was always, when I saved up enough money, I'd go to school. Then I'd have to save some more. And this is something that's funny in a way, but actually, if you're blind in the United States, Georgia, Texas, you can go to state schools free. Georgia was a state school. I didn't know that. So I'm legally blind, saving up my money. I could have gone to school free and worked away. Maybe it made me a stronger person, I'm sure, gave me some good background training, but I didn't do that. It took me a while before I divulged that I was legally blind. And after a while, it becomes obvious. At first, if I'm walking down the hallway and somebody puts a desk, I would run into it. Somebody could put their hand out for me to shake it. So I learned, always put your hand out and be like you're shaking, so they take yours. Because even people will stick their hand out, and I didn't know they were doing that. But it took me a while to feel comfortable that they would not, allow me to keep working.
Yeah, of course, especially with you doing a lot of different jobs and moving home as well. Want to make sure that sticks that job, and it's an amazing job. What was your first role within NASA?
So my first role within NASA was writing software for the motion base. It's a shuttle simulator. If you've been on a plane, or you can imagine a plane, the cockpit, and back then, now a lot of things are done through a computer monitor, but they had switches, over 1,000 switches in the crew station. And when you looked out the windows, you could see if you were doing a launch, it would actually rotate you on your back. Then when you got ready to launch, it would vibrate. You would hear the engines roaring, the volume would be turned up, and then it would move you up a little. When you wanted to land, you moved the stick, you flew with a stick. So imagine you're flying with a stick, and when you point it down, the whole motion base, about 2.5 tons, would tilt forward. And if you turn it side to side, it would move, and you'd see a runway. So I actually got to write software for probably the greatest video game in the world. So all of you that wanted to write video game software, I was doing it.
You were doing it in a real life.
Right.
So that would have gone on to, that would have been something that astronauts did to train. You obviously did a lot more with training astronauts. What's some of the missions and achievements that stand out as a point of reference during this time, so we can get a feel for some of the projects you were working on?
So I was writing software, and I got that the instructors who are teachers of astronauts would come in and make sure I coded it to their requirements, how they wanted it coded. So I got to know the instructors. They said, you got good people skills. You know how to talk. You know this stuff. So they hired me as an instructor, and I worked on STS-29. It's the Department of Defense, where they deployed a satellite I can't tell you about. Well, I
Yeah.
have to kill you. I worked the Hubble telescope, the first mission. And if you'll take your arm and stick it straight out, you had the robotic arm had a shoulder joint. So fill up your shoulder, fill up your elbow, had an elbow joint, moved just like elbow, it had a wrist joint. And then on the end where your fingers are, it would actually, if you take your other hand and point your index finger out, you'd go over and grapple that payload, lift it up, move it over, and then you released it, and then the shuttle would back away. So I trained astronauts on how to use that robotic arm, grappled the Hubble telescope, we caught it a grapple fixture, and released it. I did the Gamma Ray Observatory. I did the just several sitcoms, but I was actually teaching astronauts how to deploy payloads from the back of the cargo bay. So if you think of the shuttle, a lot of it is the cargo bay, or you can think of it as a truck. In the back is a truck. And what you can do on the shuttle, you drive it just like a truck going forward, of course it's flying. But then when you look out the back, you could fly it from the back and look through a window into the back of the cargo of the truck. And then you would fly this robotic arm. And on Earth, it couldn't lift its own weight, but up in space, it could lift a school bus. Anyway, I got to train them, and it was just a great experience. I tell people that astronauts, I would spend about 20 hours a week. It'd take them, they do generic training, but when they get to flight specific, then I would spend about half their day training them and putting in malfunctions. It's kind of like if you have a kid and you teach them, they drive a car, you want to teach them how to change a tire, so when they actually have a bad tire, they know how to do it. So we give them malfunctions. And then they would invite us over to their home. So I'd tell people, a lot of people say, oh, I got to swim with a dolphin. I got to go swimming with astronauts.
Yeah. This particular role, would you consider, was it a stressful role? Because you're obviously dealing with people, and you're dealing with people in high stress situations as well by throwing curveballs at them as well, trying to get them to see how they would adjust in that circumstance. Was it a stressful role?
It could be stressful at times. I always felt when I worked with a rookie astronaut, they're all great people. I mean, it's so hard to become an astronaut. So they've got to pass all these tests, and 10,000 may apply for 10 roles. So they're very much, but once they've flown, they could also, like, what are you teaching me? I've been up in space, I've flown. So sometimes your students, which they usually were, they were smarter than you. So a few times they could get upset with you if they had a problem during a sim, especially if the flight control team was there and they took something wrong, because we all have egos.
Yeah.
And you've got a whole flight control room, which we had 22 people in there, but we have back rooms, and they're watching this astronaut. And if they didn't handle the malfunction, sometimes they didn't like that malfunction you gave them.
Yeah, I can understand that. So obviously you were promoted up the chain numerous times in 40 years at NASA. How were these promotions pitched to you? Like, do you believe it was your greatest strength with like being positive in assisting you learning these sort of new roles, or was it something else that you utilized, like a structured sort of learning style?
I think one thing, I have a very good work ethic. So one of the things, you've got to show up and work hard. And then I also think my vision helped me in some ways because I looked at things differently. So, they always tell you, and I have a little video where I talk about this, but I have this thing where I talk about Neil Armstrong about to come up on the 55th anniversary of the Apollo landing. Apollo 11, where Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And what I tell people, as great a man as Neil Armstrong was, he could not have gone to the moon if we'd filled the control center in NASA with clones of Neil Armstrong. It took diversity of thought, different perspectives, and unique problem-solving skills. I always say cloning is overrated, but diversity inclusion is underrated. And having a blind person, I looked at things differently. We used to have to manually put in malfunctions, and I had written software, and I thought, why don't we see? And it takes you away from studying the student. So I said, I can do that with software. So I wrote software where now they could load all their malfunctions and say when they wanted to go in. And if you think about launch, we would start at launch, and I could go up and say, oh, 5 minutes into launch, fell an engine. Now we may have to do a return to launch site. We may have to go to a tower, transatlantic landing. So I did things like that that were totally different than other people hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people with disabilities, especially the blind, that we're a great resource. We're very good at problem solving because every day I've got to solve problems, and I think of things differently. Like if I need, the other day I was helping my son move dirt, and I didn't know where in his backyard was this pile of dirt, and I'm moving a wheelbarrow. So I just put my phone over there, put my music on, and when I'd come through the fence, I would listen for the music and just go to the music. It's just simple thing. And what I like to tell people, there's a song by Bob Dylan, and if I did it now today, I think I'd been much more comfortable disclosing my eyesight problem. But there's a song by Bob Dylan saying, the times they are changing.
Yeah.
So I like to play that song that you can divulge it better. So I wanted to change jobs. I'd been doing it a while, and I went to my division chief, my boss, and said, I want to do something different. I've been over flight software for like 5 years. And I said, can you come with something different? So he came to me, and I disclosed my eyesight, that I was legally blind and permanently blind. And he came to me, what I loved, he said, Tracy, I've got this opening, and I need someone that can go to all the International Partners Control Center. So you'll have to go to Russia, Germany, France, Montreal, or Italy. And he said, but do you think you can do this job with your eyesight? And would you even want to? So I went home and talked to my wife. We prayed about it, and I came back and took that job. And I actually ended up going to Moscow like 10 times, Japan, traveling the world on the taxpayer's dollar. But what I loved, he let me make the decision. He didn't think, you know what? Tracy can't see. He can't do that job. I'm not even going to talk to him about it. He came to me, and we made a decision together. And I think that's the way we should do things, is that we actually, he gave me an opportunity, and then it was up to me to fulfill that job, which I was able to do. So I think that's what I'm hoping the world is like today, that when people have talents or skill, people give them opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess your decision to disclose too, you might have at that particular point in time, you probably would have felt like you've proved that you're everything, that you're a very, very diligent worker, that you're knowledgeable. That I suppose, did that have a part to play in you disclosing at that particular point in time? Did you feel like you'd earned your stripes, sort of thing?
It really did help me. If I had come in the door, I'd already proven myself. And so now I was doing that with very limited eyesight, and I just decided to disclose it. The other thing one of your questions talked about work balance. I was working harder than I needed to because I wasn't disclosing it. So I had to present 40-page PowerPoint presentations, and I had to do them for flight readiness. So before we do a flight, I had to show that we were ready, the crew was trained, control center was ready, and I had to give these long presentations. Well, I didn't want to tell people I couldn't see, so I memorized 40 charts. And so I had to have all those memorized and say, next chart, where other people can read them. It takes a lot longer if you got to memorize things. I was doing that. And actually, we would go to these meetings, and NASA, is very dogmatic. So they'd say, we're not going to break for lunch. Well, I would have to go into that room full of all the really upper managers. They were above my boss in grade level. So I would fast the night before, not eat or drink anything, because I may have to go 6 hours without a bathroom break, because I knew if I tried to get up out of my chair, And with that huge room, I had to sit at the table, but it was surrounded by rows of people that
Yeah.
when I was going out, I might trip or fall, and that would look bad on me. So I would fast, memorize everything, and then I just thought to myself one day, I said, this is stupid, Tracy. You do these self-talk. I said, you need to tell them what you're doing, and you can use your assistive technologies. So I actually went to my boss and said, you know what, I want to let you know, and I think it was just a relief off of me, and it gave me where I had more time with my kids. So I really recommend doing it much faster than I did. But I'm also old school. I'm older, so we just thought, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Yeah.
I had some of those mottos in my brain. I had to work through those.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've reached the halfway point of this webinar. So I'll just quickly remind people, just in regards to wanting to ask your own questions, this is open. This Zoom webinar is open for questions. If you can use the keystroke Alt-H to bring up the chat window if you're using a screen reader, and then type your question in there. I'll give people another prompt as well as we get closer to the completion of the webinar. But I want to sort of switch a little bit over at this particular point in time, because this webinar series is very much about bringing people together who have had a part in charting the uncharted parts of our world. Space is often described as the final frontier, a never-ending expanse, many different terms. What are some of the discoveries that became known during your time there?
I have been so blessed to have so many. I helped deploy the Hubble telescope, and that's done so many discoveries, written the textbooks when you look back in the beginning of time. Not too long ago, we had the DART. The DART is a dual asteroid redirection test. And what we did is you'll take your arm and stick your hand and point your finger straight ahead and take your right arm doing that. Now take your left arm and make a fist and just go over whatever you're pointing at and bump that hand over about 10 degrees. Just move it over a little. We have proven, we actually took a spaceship, launched it to an asteroid, ran into it, had a collision, and knocked it off course. We had the dinosaurs, go away because of an asteroid hit. If an asteroid, or probably when will it hit, we now have proven we can go in and do that. That's something that can save all of us. It could destroy our planet. So NASA has proven we can do that, and we're ready. If something's coming at us, all we have to do is knock it a little bit off. So if you just change the course a little bit, when it's far enough away, it will miss us a good bit. We're doing things in avionics. So if you think about outer space, we have a thing called Quest, and what we can do is now we're taking, when a plane breaks the sound barrier or jet, it makes this loud noise and rattles your windows, and I like to say rattles your brain. Well, now we've made it so it makes a thud, and we're going to make where we actually have that air travel available. We're doing test flights now over cities where people can measure. So when I went to Japan, it took me 14 hours. Probably take me maybe longer to go to Australia. I could cut that time down to maybe 6.5 hours. So if I want to go to New York City, it's about 3.5 hours. I could cut that down to an hour and a half. So that's, changing for people that have to travel a lot. We do a lot of things studying our ocean and our climate, things like that. We're going to the moon, and someday we may want to live. We can mine there, go to Mars, send people there. It's just the things we're doing are pretty amazing.
So the Mars mission where they deployed the rover, were you at NASA at that particular point in time?
Yes, I only left NASA on July 1st, which we're barely past. I worked at NASA all the way until June 30th. So what I love about the Mars things, we have the rover. So the rover is climbing around, doing experiments on the soil, and it's actually grabbing soil we're interested in studying more, putting it in a capsule. We have another mission that's going to go pick up and bring those samples back. We have moon samples, but we don't have them from Mars. But the other thing they call ingenuity. So the rover in his belly, it dropped a drone helicopter. And that helicopter, I like to think if you had to crawl down to the grocery store or somewhere you wanted to go to your office, think how long it'd take you. But if you could get in a helicopter, how faster you could go, how much more you could see. So we called it a DTO, a test objective. And what it did, you think, oh, Mars is like 1% atmosphere, 1/3 of gravity. So, oh, a helicopter's gonna be easy. 1% atmosphere, if you wave a hand in front of your face, you can, really fast, you can feel that breeze. Think if there was no air here. 1%, it really can't get lift. So it had to, using scientific terms, super duper fast. But we were actually to fly another vehicle controlled by Earth across the Mars surface and see so much more. And it made 50 flights before it finally wasn't able to operate anymore. The batteries went bad, but we didn't know if it even worked. And we were able to do 50. So we've shown we can fly on other planets with man-made vehicles or human-made vehicles.
And that would still be up there too, wouldn't it?
They're still up there, yeah. So the rover is still crawling around. It's still working, going around and getting samples, source samples, and studying them.
So I've got a question from Kathy. With the advancement of assistive tech, is there now a good sprinkle of vision impaired folks working in this field?
Yes, there is. And you know what's amazing? Even things I didn't think you could do with assistive technology. But I have a Dr. Robert Shelton. He is a scientist and works in simulations, but he works with the engineering part, making sure it works. I have a guy from Alabama, Craig Davis, that is also totally blind, and Robert Shelton is totally blind, and he's working on the payloads that we're sending up to the station. There's a guy that works for NASA that studies the stars and planets. I thought, gosh, when I look up at the sky when I could see, how could a blind person study the stars and planets? But a lot of it's measurements. So when you send a telescope for something, what's the distance from the Earth that is? You can't tell from looking at a star. You can't tell from looking at a planet. It's math. What's the size of that planet? All that is calculated from math, and all you got to do is do the math. It's not by your eyesight, but by measurement. So we have astronomers that are totally blind that are working for NASA. It's just amazing all the different fields.
Yeah, awesome. So I like to sort of talk about this sort of thing with our guests. You obviously had to learn the field. Is there something at NASA that you came across, like a discovery that surpassed even your wildest dreams, like something you didn't think would ever be possible or ever be a discovery, or yeah.
I think some of the things I had thought of is us launching to change the direction of a meteorite coming to us. We actually went out and got a soil sample from an asteroid and brought it back to Earth. So, we had got a soil sample from Mars, but we have one from an asteroid, and actually went there. And the way they got it is they actually did air pressure, sprayed it on the surface of the asteroid. It stirred up the dust, and then they collected the dust and the particles, and then they brought them back. So we can look at an asteroid that's been way out. The James Webb Telescope is actually looking back to the beginning of time. So when you look at something today that we're getting from there, it's looking back billions of years, because light is just now reaching us. We talk about the vastness of space. We're having to look way back to the beginning of time, because we're looking at light that left that place so long ago, it's just getting to us. And one way I explained it before is, if I take a snapshot of myself and then I was to take it and give it to somebody and said, all right, I want you to travel to Australia. It's going to take you a while because you can't use a car. You're going to have to use you got to walk till you get to, the ocean in California. Then you're going to have to sail on a boat. So you get there maybe 4 years later. Well, if you look at that picture, it looks at me back in time, because it's been traveling all that time. It's a snapshot of me at this date and time 4 years ago. I may have shaved my head by then. I may have got me an earring. I may have gotten a tattoo. So you're seeing not me today, but way back in time. And that just blows my mind that we're looking at things. We're going back in history and looking at things, but we're looking at it today.
Yeah, amazing. So this is obviously a question you're very, very probably used to being asked, but I'm going to be a fanboy and ask it anyway. In your opinion, true or false, are we alone in the universe?
So hold on a second. Over this one? So I thought I would just give y'all a treat. I'm wearing an alien mask for you that can't see. I always take this to school, but and we do that. And what I tell people, people ask me, "Do you think aliens have visited our solar system?" And I say no because they checked Yelp and they found out one star, the sun.
So,
When I talk to kids, I've done a lot of Zoom. I go to places, but when you do a Zoom, the teachers will move to students. So I brought my own. I brought my own sound machine. But going back to the question, yes, I do believe there is. I believe we're going to find there's life on Mars. Now, is there life like humans? That part I don't know, but I know we're going to find signs of life. But I don't know what it's going to be like. But if you look at the vastness of the universe, at one time we didn't know there were planets like ours going around other suns. And there we've found a lot that have the same atmosphere that we could survive on. We found moons, even off of Jupiter, that we could go and live off of. So when you start looking at that, you know, when God made us, I don't think this makes me any less believe in God that He did it. He's just like, why would you just stop with us? You know, if you look at it, it doesn't mention it, but it does not mention it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I believe there is.
So you obviously believing that there is. That's good. That's very interesting. Can you tell us a lesser known story that you can share from one of these space missions? As I said, you've been and you've seen a lot, and there are there are countless sort of stories that you would probably hear. You got a front row seat to a lot of when you're running the mission control center. You're obviously hearing the communication off world or off planet, should I say? What's some of the things that you can share with us?
So, you know, right now we're having conflict with Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
And we were going to the mirror to the Americans. So it's kind of for us to practice before we went to the International Space Station, went to the Russian. And one of the things you do barters. So if you're working with somebody in another country, you do something for them, they do something for you. So we had a refrigerator that was probably like if you have a small apartment one, that we were carrying up empty, and we were going to bring back samples for them. You know, one of the things we always study in weightlessness is bone loss, because you have that muscle loss, they exercise a lot. But so probably bringing back urine samples and other things. But that refrigerator was empty on the way up there. We didn't have anything we needed to take to them. And so our astronauts thought about it, and they filled it with Bluebell ice cream. They were able to fill that whole thing because a refrigerator works better when you have something cold in it, because now not having to cool as much empty space didn't strain it as much. So we filled that refrigerator with ice cream, and when they went over to the Russians and opened it up, the Russians were so happy. They actually rationed it out and had it for almost 6 months. And I just thought it was a cool story of our two countries working together in something as small as ice cream, making a bond between them. And I can tell you, I traveled to Russia at least 10 times. And even today on the International Space Station, we're still working good together because we have a common mission. And that's one thing I like about the International Space Station. All of us coming together with one vision. One vision is to do science, to better the earth, to work together, to learn, you know, to explore, all those things that the human spirit wants to do. And I just wish this whole world could do this, get behind this, not just with NASA, but just join together in a common cause. And I think the NASA does that. It's helping us keep relationships with them and other countries.
So coming together now, obviously the space race was something a little bit different once upon a time. Became one of the most well-known missions in humanity's history of exploration. In your opinion, what is the next giant leap?
So I think the giant leap is, and we're kind of got this plotted out. Go back to, we're going to go around the moon on Artemis 2. And, you know, Apollo was the first one. Artemis is now the program we're doing. In Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. So I think that is cool. They're sending the first woman and first person of color. So we're doing diversity inclusion. They're also, ESA has hired their first astronaut with a disability. That's good for us, for people with disabilities like myself and a lot of people listening. It's opening up doors and doing things different. But we're going to do Gateway, which is going to be an international space station, but its outpost is at the moon. So we're going to put a space station there. Then we're going to start living on the moon. And then the thing that people may not be as aware as much is that moon has 1/6 gravity, no atmosphere. So it's so easy to launch. You know, in Newton's law, third reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Doesn't take much to get off the surface. We don't have to have these huge rockets. And I'll show you. This is the Artemis rocket right here. I'm holding it, but if you were able to see it, it actually, the tail of it would be on a football field. You ever seen an American football field? But it's a 100 meters from the tail to the top, or about 365 yards. And it has 2 rockets on the side. And this rocket here, it gives 8.8 million pounds of thrust to get this out the orbit. On the moon, when we get there, we can launch off it and go to Mars easily. So we can take our rockets and go from there. Now we can go to Mars. And Mars is a lot like Earth. It just doesn't quite have the atmosphere because it didn't have as much gravity, and the atmosphere is very thin. But there's things we can do about that. So I'm just excited that we're getting out of low Earth orbit. You know, we've been scraping the surface, and now we're going to ascend. It's a big deal to go to the moon, but it's even a much bigger deal to get to Mars.
Yeah, amazing. And from what, if I just clarify, so you're saying that we're looking to colonize the moon so we could launch more space missions with easier sort of thrust out of that, or having no atmosphere. So you're colonizing the moon to use it as a halfway point to Mars.
Right, and the gateways in are going to be a little bit like the astronauts will go and dock with the gateway. Then they'll go down in the human lander system. It's something that ferries them to to the moon surface and back up. And then they can actually leave from there and go to Mars. So it's kind of like building, a string of things that we just build upon. And it's kind of like if you've ever been camping, you may go camp in your backyard first, and you say, oh my gosh, I needed more padding. That hurt my back sleeping on that ground, or I needed this. Then you go on your long camping trip where, you put your backpack on. So we learn from the moon, we learn from station right at the surface. Now we're going to the moon, and then we'll go to Mars. Moon, we can get there in like a day and a half and back. So we can go around really fast. We go to Mars, it takes 6 months. You got to really be prepared when you're going somewhere. It takes you 6 months to get there and back. So it's totally different things. So we're building blocks, so you want to think of it.
Have you come across other sort of lessons that NASA has learned over the years that you were there?
Yeah, so I'll show you really quick one that is kind of neat. I'm holding in my hand the Saturn rocket. So if you look at it, it looks like a paper towel comb. It's just a straight rocket. The humans are up at the top on this, and this is about 100 meters. Then we went to the shuttle. The shuttle, yikes. I don't think it broke. So sure, am I still centered? Is enough?
Yes, yep, you're still centered, yeah.
All right, good. So the shuttle actually had 2 solid rocket boosters, and it had 3 main engines. So you would light these engines, and then you'd light these solid rocket boosters, which are much more powerful. Once we saw these 3 engines lit, we could light these other 2 because we knew we're leaving. This external, this big old tank that the shuttle rides on. Just imagine a big old tank or a cone that the shuttle, which looked like an airplane's riding on, and then 2 slender candles on either side. Once you let them, so now if you go to the Artemis, where's it at here? All right, yeah, over here.
No, not the other direction. The hand when you're shuttling.
Yeah.
Go backwards.
All right. Okay. So now the Artemis, we actually learned is that just take the design and the Apollo, they didn't have these 2 looks like little candles or bottle rockets. If you ever shot fireworks, we decided to put those 2 things together, and then we're reusing over here. We have 4 shuttle engines. We're using the shuttle engines that we had before. So we changed our technology, and this gives you 8.8 million pounds of thrust. The Apollo only got you 5.4. So now we can lift things almost twice as much, but at least 1/3 more cargo. So we can carry everything to the moon to build our outposts. So we built across, if you look at the Apollo, shuttle, and the Artemis, each one you can see things that we took from the previous.
So you're working for an organization that's constantly evolving. Did you find that challenging at all to keep up?
So I think what you do is incremental. It goes slow enough that you can do it. Think about back in my day, for some of the viewers that are my age, we didn't have internet. We didn't have a cell phone. I remember having a pager that I was using everything.
Yeah.
So then we went to the big old phones you could carry so they could get in touch with me, to the little ones. Now the internet, now your phone is a computer. You can do anything. And so I think it's because it's incremental that you can do that. We didn't have email when I first started. We had to use film to view graphs instead of projecting things on a computer screen. So I think it's because it's incremental. And one of the things I'll tell the people listening, I always tell kids, become one with the assistive technology. The better you can use it, the more productive you'll be, which makes you employable. So the one thing that I try to do is when something new came across, I tried to learn it and learn all the features and then figure out how does it work for me. I have my, hey Siri. Hey Siri.
So here, she's on, you're using the phone. Tracy,
Yeah, I was trying to do.
Yeah, but you're using the phone to video.
Oh, I'm using my phone to video, so I forgot for sure. But having Siri, with voiceover, I can go through my emails faster than a sighted person. I like to go to meetings sometimes, and of course they want you to pay attention, not be doing things on your computer. So I could be doing that under the table and get my work done, and nobody even knew it. And faster. What's that shit? So anyway, it was kind of neat. I just recommend the assistive technologies are growing so fast that it's really making my disability not a disability anymore. When everybody had the pandemic and people had to go to Zoom, I was used to assistive technology. So I just I felt like I was the board. I just assimilated everything and kept going and was even better. And what we did at NASA, which is kind of crazy, nobody cut their cameras on. And I thought I would tell people, wow, this is leveling the playing field. Nobody can see anybody. And I can't either. This is great.
So we're getting close to winding up today. So I do have a question from Kathy. With the late 60s moon landing, are there any plans to mine the resources there?
Oh, yes. We really think we can mine, and companies are looking to make money by going and mining on the moon. And Kathy, thank you for you're the person that's given my first 2 questions, so thank you for your interest. Come work at NASA. You're curious what it takes, but yes, they are looking at mining and bringing things back. And what's great about the moon, once we get some, say, well, how are you going to be able to get all that off the moon? like I was saying, going to Mars or other places, it's easy to get off the surface of the moon. So we can get a lot of things up together and get it back. And it's almost like once you start, an object in motion will stay in motion unless it's acted on by an unequal force. So once you point it towards the Earth, you just have the heat shield come down, grab it up, use it. And we're also thinking of mining it so we don't have to bring all those materials to go to Mars. We can actually build our spaceship, doing a lot of things we want to do to go to Mars, build it on the moon. It costs a lot of money to get some off the Earth because of the gravity and all. But once you get to the moon, it's not much, so just use the materials there.
So, Tracy, final question for today. Things that we can leave our audience with today, talking a little bit about what is it that we have to look forward to in the future? What's some of the things that people can expect from NASA and from yourself as well? How do people follow your exploits as well?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I want to leave with a little thing I like to talk to people about. I got to find my straws up here. What's it? I found it. So when I talk to anybody about is that a lot of times we like to dream big, especially when we're young. But even when we're older, I still have dreams of things I hadn't done in my life I want to do. So I tell people dream big. Then once you dream, I actually tell people, write it down, print it on a T-shirt. I want to work at NASA. I want to be a graphic designer for NASA. I want to own my own restaurant. It doesn't have to be NASA. I want to cook for astronauts. We have to have cooks. We have to have electricians, all that. So write down what it is. And then I say, we call what we do at NASA plan, train, fly. So like a sports team, if you're in a ballet or play or sports team, we make a plan. So we plan our mission. What are we going to do on this mission? Where are we going in your life? I want to go out here and work as a flight controller for NASA. I want to go and open my own business. So you make a plan, what you want to do. Then you train for it. That's what we call it plan, train, fly. So when you train, you say, do I need a degree for this? Maybe I get an internship. We're really big at NASA, we get an internship. If you want to be open your own restaurant, go to a restaurant and say, hey, I'd like to work for you. Even if it's for free, because people will be shocked at that, you're learning the business and just do it for a while. So you make that plan and then you go fly, you execute the plan. So when you make a dream, don't let people tell you can't do it. Make a plan, because if you don't make a plan, you may end up doing what my brothers and sisters did in heaven. I told you I came from a very destructive family. You can see that. I have a sister and a brother, both overdosed on drugs. I won't even tell you about it. The other one is done. It's because sometimes you inherit the sins. But I had a plan and a dream, and one of them was to leave the state of Georgia so I could start my life away from these things that could attack me or pull me down. And how I did it. Now I still have relationships with my family there. Go home about 4 times a year, but I had to separate. And I think the key for me was the plan. And then I got to get a degree. I have to have this. I've got to be able to show work history. So I became a manager over an apartment complex. And you're managing a lot of people, much like the control center, but different. And then I actually was able to fly. So I use this potato. It's Mr. Potato Head. And, what's here? Oh, my wife said it's upside down. I'm taking off his eyes, so he won't see what I'm going to do. His mouth, so he won't hear him scream. And his ears, so he won't hear. And what I do is, this potato is when you have doubt. I've learned to play the guitar lately, a harmonica. And people, I have no musical talent. So this potato is your doubt. And I have a straw in my other hand. And so what I do, if you're at this end of the straw, I'm holding the straw between my 2 fingers. And on the left-hand side is where I'm at today. And on the right-hand side is where I want to go. So I make a plan, and then I execute the plan, travel on the straw. And then the key to doing this is to take action. So I have this big old potato, and I'm going to take this straw, and I'm going to I'm going to go right through this thing and break through these doubts. And if you look, the straw, can you see this, Jordan, that came through?
I can, yeah. The straw's gone all the way through the potato, yeah.
Most people wouldn't think a flimsy straw would go through a potato, but it can. And the key is to take action. You've got to take action, and then you can break through those barriers, and you can be everything you wanted to be. I tell people this is how we invented the French fry, by the way. So it's another one of those jokes. But remember this lesson is to make a plan and believe in yourself. Self-advocacy, Jordan, you probably teach it. I had to do so many things myself. When I'm guided in a marathon, I run at the end of a rope, and the people that are guiding me, they run beside me to guide me, in front of me to protect me, behind me to encourage me. I still have to run. So just remember that. Run the race. You can do it. I just believe people with disabilities have so much you can bring with your different views.
Tracy, we've hit the end of our webinar, so thank you so much for coming and sharing your expertise and knowledge and a bit of your background as well, and for being so candid with us. So thank you very much for taking part today, and I hope all of our listeners have really enjoyed it, and thank you for coming along as well.
And you're fine to share my email address and a couple of links. People have questions, you can always send them. And if a hurricane hits me, my hope is that it will blow me all the way to Australia.
We'll deploy a net for you, okay?
All right, that's good. Oh, one last thing. I am the first person with a disability to go weightless. I flew on what we call the Vomit Comet, a KC-135. It does parabola, so the plane goes up really steep, goes over, and you go weightless for 30 seconds. And so I actually got to do that and fly on it. And I did 50 parabolas. And I tell people, I don't have a license to drive, but NASA gave me a license to fly. So I was able to push off and fly like Superman, my arms out across the cargo bay. So anyway, thank you again, folks.
Thank you so much, Tracy.